Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me again for another edition of our panel discussion for GIFF Talks with Shahbano Alvi. She is, in my opinion, a Renaissance woman because she's done a lot of things. She started her career as a graphic designer, and she set up the design department of Oxford University Press in 1991 in Pakistan. She's exhibited photography and her woodwork and internationally and as well as in Pakistan. She is a published author. She set up her own publication house in 2001. She's translated works from translated works into Urdu and English literature, and she's also a screenwriter and a director. And last year we had the pleasure of curating her short film, Mere Dost Ayaz. So let's get talking to her and get to know a little bit more about her and her art. Thank you, Shabano, for joining us today. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you. That's very kind.
So I just wanted to start off with the first question, which is you started your work as a graphic designer and worked in book publishing for many years. And very recently, you decided to get into screenwriting, and your first film, like I mentioned, Mere Dost Ayaz. So, how did that transition happen, and why did you feel the need to uh, step into writing and co-directing a film?
Well, Vivian, actually, like you just mentioned, I started off as a graphic designer, and then I took my first job with Oxford University Press, Pakistan, and to set up their design department. I was the head of the design department. So basically, I was working in visual art as well as when I got the manuscripts for designing, I used to read a lot. So both these things, the visual arts and the written word I was absorbing both the arts simultaneously. After I left OUP, I started my own publishing house by compiling 10 children's poetry books. And I started a, language literature course in Urdu for children. So then, after my publishing house was about, I think in 2017, I started writing a book, and in 2018, it was published. And then one of the production houses got interested in one of my stories. So they said they wanted to film it. And I said, fine, but I would also like to be a part of the direction team because it's basically my idea. And I thought what I had visualized would be nobody else can visualize. And I also had a training of photography. So I started off with another director, but soon enough, the other person said that, it's better that it should be how I visualize it. So then I did it myself, and my co-director just left it and went her own way. So it just came very naturally. There was not a conscious transition, but I think I was working both in visuals and in words.
So, I mean, even though it was an organic transition for you, there must have been some challenges about moving from prose and poetry to script writing because that's a completely different beast, and then obviously directing because that's not something you had done before, right?
No, I had not directed before, but surprisingly, it was not very difficult because I had kept up my photography all along, and I'd been taking photographs for a very long time. In fact, during COVID, I used to take, there was sort of a program on internet that challenged and that asked people to take a photograph every day within the confines of the home. So I did it for 1 year. So it was 100 pictures every year. So 300. So I was doing photography side by side. As far as screenplay is concerned, when I've written the book and I've written the story and I've written the word, then all I needed to do was just change it into dialogue. So it was not very difficult for me to change the prose into dialogues. What I really learned was in the realm of direction, because that was the first time I was doing it, even though I had my vision inside my head, but it was difficult. I was learning as I was, because there were the lights persons, and then the post production was an eye opener. I had to sit with the editor to edit the movie, because at the end of the day it was my story and I knew the most about it. So it has been a great learning, learning journey for me.
And how did your experience as your education and your experience as a designer, how did that inform your work as a filmmaker?
Sorry,
How did your experience and your education as a graphic designer, or even as a published author, how did that inform how you um,
making the film.
how you made the film? But but obviously with the screenplay you said that you just had to change the dialogue, but how did your graphic design experience inform that whole journey?
You see, when I started writing my stories, and as I wrote the story, I had a visual in my mind. Because I was a visual artist, I was trained as a graphic designer. I had no training in language writing. My training was purely in the visual arts.
Individuals, yeah.
So and I started writing because I'd been reading it from a very early age. I started reading when I was 9, I think, and I've read in Urdu and English a lot. So when I started writing my stories, I was visualizing the stories with it. So when I made the film, and I was, as I was doing the scenes, I knew, because I had been trained for doing the compositions in photography or in posters. In graphic design, you learn about composing and composition. Yeah. So that came in that was very helpful. When I was making the film and I was looking at the frames of the film, my training as in my composition of posters and paintings came in very handy.
Yeah. And coming back to your stories, because before you tackled filmmaking, you moved into writing, and a lot of your stories deal with memory. They deal with the perception of truth, what is truth, and how one individual or two individuals see what the truth is for them. Would I be incorrect in thinking that because you have moved a couple of times in your life, you were born in what is now Bangladesh, and then you moved to Pakistan, and then so does that play into how you end up writing your stories, or did that even have some bearing on those?
You see, my childhood was spent in what was then East Pakistan, as well as in West Pakistan, because I was studying in a school in Lahore. I was living in a hostel, and my father went in 1959 to East Pakistan. He was a civil engineer. So he worked there, and we went all over the place, Rangpur, Dinajpur, Kushtia. And I have very happy memories of those times. Also, my friends, my Bengali friends were there, and our neighbors, and our, domestic help. So I have very happy memories of all that time, and which is what must have come into my stories, because basically when you talk about the creative arts, art is actually self-expression, and creativity is when you change it. Creativity is a tool through which you change the intangible that is in your mind to the tangible which can be seen by others. So as I was going through all that time, I was writing my stories, and my mind was visualizing it. So the whole thing came into words and then films automatically.
Um, because you've been involved in the literary arts since the beginning of your career, even as a graphic designer, um, I wanted to talk about the lack of literacy itself in Pakistan, the uh, the lack of interest in reading books, which also I feel translates into a visual literacy at some point. Um, but do you think it's also just because of a, you know there's a limited access to those stories for the average Pakistani, a to be able to afford books to read, um, and then also going to the cinemas or being able to watch movies that are not necessarily the usual popcorn stuff that you would get.
Vivian, I think I generally don't agree with most people when they say that there's a lack of interest in Pakistan for reading books. I mean, yes, of course, the literacy rate is not great, but for people who are literate, books are very important, and we can find that out when we have book fairs and the prices of the books are at a discounted rate. So people and children and adults and grown-ups and young people and children, they flock to those places to buy books, and we make a lot of sales on in those on in the book fairs. So I would say it is mostly mm, because of the monetary constraints.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think people are fond of it. People everywhere are, the same. They like to read books. They like to go into their imaginary world to relax and run away from their, real world. They can go to cinema. They like going to cinemas. They like reading books. All the arts are very important for the people, and I think they like it. But there is a monetary constraint.
So then how do we, when I say me, when I say we, I don't, it's more of a prerogative, we, but how does one go about giving that access? If there is monetary
I
constraint,
I
then
have been trying to get together a lot of publishers. To my idea is that, you see, publishers, when they give their books to the distributors, they give it on a 50% discount rate. So if the price of the book is, let's say, 800, we give it to the distributor for 400. That's the average general rule, not in any case. But now I have suggested it to many publishers that we get together and make a showroom and give our books on a discounted rate. I mean, we give it to the distributors also for the greater market, but there should just be one showroom for those people who can't afford those books. But let's see, let's hope. One hopes that it works.
so is the monetary constraint, like, does it stem from the fact that books are just too expensive? Like, is there a way that, because you've been in publishing, so is there a way that the prices of books, like at the start, just is there some way to lower those, or is
It is. These days, it's very difficult because the paper has become very expensive. Everything has become very expensive. We cannot bring the price of the book down. The only thing that one can do, which is how I started my publishing house. I started making books for children, and I started making school books.
Hmm.
So, because school books grow in a large number, you can keep the price relatively down. And then I also got my books sponsored, and then I distributed them to the lower market schools, free of charge. So that's one way of getting the books to the um, to people who are not economically very well off, but only children.
Hmm.
So guys, there are so many ways. Let's see. Let's hope.
So, okay, coming back to your movie and writing for film and directing. Um, do you think that the art of storytelling, like you said, there's no lack of interest in reading. Does the art of storytelling or the lack of literacy for storytelling, does that sort of have any bearing um, on the interest of reading? Because I mean, if there is an interest in reading books, then shouldn't there be more of a visual literacy as well? Because I mean, if you look at the generally for TV dramas or whatever, the stuff that people say, that especially Pakistani audiences, that the kind of stories that are coming are pretty much the same. There's nothing new, there's nothing exciting. So
I don't know, Vivian, because when I go out there are book clubs and there are talks and we meet people. I think there is a lot of talent that's coming up. They're writing stories. There's no lack of, and they're writing poetry. I mean, every poetry book or every story book cannot be
the
a
basis
top
of
class, right?
yeah,
But it shows that people are doing it. And story in any case, storytelling can never stop because imagination can never stop. People may not be as prolific in writing the stories because of the lack of literacy in certain areas. But even those people, like when I was making this film, my editor, he was a young boy, assistant editor. He was a young boy, and he had so many stories in his mind. And he said, "I just need somebody to write it." In fact, so I said, "Why don't you give me your idea, and I will write it for you, and then you can learn from that." So it was a wonderful story, and I think it was a very good visual story. And I told him that uh, you can just make it into a good film. So people are wanting to learn. They've got imagination. They've got the art of storytelling. But and also there's no dearth of talent and writers of prose and poetry. It is just how we look at it and where we look at it,
so
and
if sorry, go ahead.
in which circle we are talking about.
So if there's no other talent for writing poetry and prose, how does, like, why does that not translate eventually into the visual form, when you're talking about script writing or screenplays? Because there's obviously a gap over there. So how do we bridge that, in your opinion?
The gap is in filmmaking, in the visual
Yeah,
filmmaking.
yeah.
Filmmaking involves a lot of money. It involves a lot of money, which very few people have. You see? So the talent is going around everywhere, but depends on who is going to back back them for making a film. So I think the films are not being made not because there is not talent, but because very hardly anyone wants to put in money. Hardly anyone wants to put in money enough for a good equipment, top class equipment to go around the world. The world is really changing fast. We need top class equipment to translate our talent into a visual treat. So money for that, and I'm not saying that there's a lack of money, but it's just that people are not putting it for films.
Fair enough.
That's what I think.
So you also mentioned on one of the other podcasts that you were on, that writing for the TV, like TV plays or whatever, is something that um, you're interested in and you're getting into. Um, how do you what do you make of that world, and how does your work sort of translate into that realm? Because the way generally TV shows in Pakistan work is that they have a lot of episodes. So, what are the challenges of taking a short story and translating that to something which is over quite a few episodes?
Actually, I have not ventured into TV.
Okay.
I've not had a chance to go into that.
Okay.
But since now I've made my first film, I'm going to strive and explore that area also.
Okay. Sorry, I was under the impression that that's something that you had already taken a step towards.
No, I've written for TV, but it has not been made into a program as yet.
So, in the writing process itself, what did you see as the challenges? Like, because obviously you worked in the writing process itself, or because you have written something. You've written for short films before, and then you've obviously now you've finished writing for TV, even though it's not made. But what are the challenges of translating short stories to something that is over, an episodic arc, as opposed to a short film? Like, what are the challenges, and how could you sort of?
Again, I don't think there's any challenge if you know how to write. Then you can write a short film. I have to finish it for that much in that much time, and then for TV, you have to write each episode for 20 minutes. So the challenge is there that you have to finish that, make that segment interesting, make the story part interesting for that period of time. That's the challenge in it.
But how do you reconcile? Because obviously the even if you're writing something for a 20-minute episode, that has overall that has to work over the number of episodes, whereas in a short film it's more contained. So
I'll tell you. Let's say if I've got I'll tell you how I did the one TV serial that I wrote with Hasina Moeen, and she did the writing part, and I had the idea, and I was giving her the idea. That's how I started. So there was this story that I had written. It was a long, short story, and we thought that we'll change it into a TV serial. So we had a financer also, and we had made we had written 3 or 4 episodes. So what we needed to do was to change that full story into let's say 13 parts. So all you need to do is look at the story and say, I have to divide this story into 13 parts, so that every part, when it finishes, it keeps the interest of the viewer alive.
Yeah, so you have a cliffhanger at the end, and then that can lead into.
It's a very interesting process. I enjoy it immensely.
So with Mere Dost Ayaz, that was your first short film. How did that come about? How did that idea come about, and how did you sort of what did you learn from that specific movie? Because that was obviously something that started you down the journey, right? So it must have been very special for you.
The idea started when I was very young. I was studying for my college. My friend and I were sitting, and my friend, it was late at night, 12 o'clock at night, and my friend just said, she said, we were talking about to take some time off from our studies. We used to do joint studies, and he said, I'm a jinn. So then we had a good laugh, and then the things, fizzled off. So when I was sitting writing a story, that sentence came back to me, and then I started writing in it. And then I thought, what if it was like this? Because in this story, what I have tried to say is that, self-sacrifice and unselfish love is a quality that you find in most people. And, you don't think of yourself, you think of the other person. And it is actually a story of sacrifice and unselfish love. So
And
that's not how it started. When we were sitting, we were just, jesting, but I built up the story on that one sentence.
okay. And now that you've already made that film, it's already gone out in the world. What's next for you? What are you most excited about in the rest of 2023, coming in 2024? What are you working on?
Well, I'm looking forward to my Urdu book being published this year, inshallah, by Sangamil, a book of Urdu short stories. But I have written, 2 more scripts for this series, in which Mera Dost Ayaz is the first film. So I've written 2 more stories for that series, and I'm very excited about it. So I'm hoping that we are able to film that also. Let's see.
And obviously, once that goes into production, it'll be in 2024. And have you? How so? I don't know much about the financing bit about Mere Dost Ayaz, but for short films, did you find it difficult for to get financing for that film or to crew up, because that's obviously not something you had done before? How does someone who's starting out do that?
It is very difficult, because when I was looking for it, I couldn't find anybody to finance it. These people luckily came to me. We had made a short documentary series for a friend of mine, and these color short people and myself, we had done something small for a friend of mine in the US. So after that, then those people came and they said, why don't we make a film with one of your stories, because we like this story. I said, okay. That's how it started. So now for the next 2 or 3 films, I don't know, because obviously they can't go on putting in money if they don't make any money. So now when I look around for finances, let's hope. But it is a difficult process.
It is. And what about crewing? Because that's not something you had prior crewing for the film, like getting different people to work in certain positions for the film. How did you reconcile that? And for someone who is a novice filmmaker in Pakistan, as most people are, what advice would you give them, if they want to jump into making short films?
To people who want to make short films?
Yeah, people who don't have prior experience.
Well, I would just say that they should first learn about it. They must learn a little about photography, about composing, about the visual arts. And they should learn, if they've got a story, depends whether they're going to write it or whether they're going to direct it. But if they're going to direct it, then they must have experience or little expertise in photography and composition and the visual arts. But if they want to write it, then they can write it as they like it. And because as you start something and as you work on it, you learn a lot. On the job training is something very important, and it really teaches a lot to the person who's doing it. So all the younger people who want to start working on this thing, I would say just go ahead and start whatever you have in mind. Start working on your dreams, because one day or the other, your dream does come true. Zara time lagta hai. It does take sometimes it takes long, sometimes it's there, but it does come true. God helps you if you help yourself.
Well, those are certainly some very wise words to end this GIF talk on. Again, Shahbano Alvi, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. We really appreciate it. We wish you all the luck in the world to complete the films in the series and for your book that's going to be published. And we can't wait to see what you put out in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. You've been very kind, and it was absolutely a pleasure talking to you, Vivian.
Same here. Same here.
Thank you.
You have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.